when you do walkthroughs.
That would be great.
Feeling a little bit famous right now, guys, what's saying?
Yeah, we're proud to know you.
I probably will need a Zoom link.
Oh,
Both of
I'll
us.
send it over.
I almost called it the Cube Literacy Bill, the Rocky Literacy Bill, but I didn't.
Us two lowlings really appreciate being able to hang out with you guys. You know, it's
The
real.
cool kids.
Yeah.
So welcome everybody to Senate Education. We are Representative Conlon and Representative Buss. I think Representative Buss is going to be able to make it. Representative Conlon, hopefully, if not today or right soon, we'll get him in a little bit later whenever he's off the floor. But we do have Ledge Council here that can take us through H.873. Ms. St. James is a little bit in a similar situation. She might be in and out because they too are going to be on the House floor. She too is going to be on the House floor dealing with some of these issues. So that the House is dealing with. So we told her that we would accommodate her schedule. We do have Mr. O'Grady here and who's working to throw things up on the screen. Yeah. Before the snow.
Wait for the rest of the day, right?
That's,
Back to the months, right?
I didn't bring my sneakers, I can't go.
Should I begin?
Please, thanks.
This is Mike O'Grady with Legislative Council. I'm here to walk you through H.873. An act relating to financing the testing for and remediation of the presence of polychlorinated phenols in schools. The first thing I want to do is to refresh your memory about why you're here, and you can see that evolution in section 2 of the bill, page 6 or page 5. So you'll remember that in 2021 Acts and Resolves number 74, you required that the Department of Environmental Conservation conduct indoor air quality testing of all public schools and approved and recognized independent schools that were constructed or renovated before 1980. When you enacted that, you required those schools to be tested by 2024. But the next year, you move that 2024 data up to 2027, to 2025. And then last year, you moved that data up to 2027. In addition, last year, in the big bill, you appropriated 29.2, 32.5, depending on how you look at some of the numbers, from the education fund to the Agency of Education for the purposes of establishing a grant program, grants to schools that tested in excess of school action levels for PCBs to investigate, remediate, and remove PCB contamination from their schools. There's been discussion largely in the House about whether or not the PCB indoor air quality testing program for schools should continue. Should it be paused? Should it be fully funded? Should it be, should it be addressed as a larger, universal, holistic scheme for school construction as a whole? Those are all policy discussions that you all will have, but what the House Education Committee and ultimately the House has done is it will allow for continued testing for PCBs in schools, but with some statements of intent about how it will be funded, how investigation, remediation, and removal will be funded. What will happen if the money at the Agency of Education gets too low to fully fund investigation, remediation, and removal? And then it also takes away the deadline date by which all schools need to test. And I'll come back to that language in a minute once we go through section 1 of the bill.
So Mr. Gray, so it's not saying schools have to stop testing.
No, it does not say schools have to stop testing, but it says testing will stop if there's $4 million or less at the Agency of Education that's available to do investigation, remediation, and removal grants. It's like, why test
Yeah.
when you don't have the money to do the cleanup and the removal? Don't put the school in the place where they're in a corner and the state has no money to give them. So that's the concept there. So you'll see on page 1, section 1, sub A, the first thing is there's a statement of intent or statement that if the school is required to test for the presence of PCBs, because some were not, that the Agency of Natural Resources shall conduct the testing or pay for the testing. So the testing cost does not fall on the school, it falls on A&R. And they were given $4.5 million in 2021 to do the testing. They've drawn some money from the Environmental Contingency Fund as well, but they will be the ones conducting the testing. Then there is a second statement of intent that actually has 2 statements of intent in it. The first statement of intent is that it's the intent of the General Assembly that to hold the manufacturers of PCBs liable for the cost of investigation, remediation, and removal. And there is litigation ongoing to hold those manufacturers liable for those costs.
Within Vermont or national?
Vermont. And then prior to any judgment in that litigation, it's the intent of the General Assembly that the state is going to pay for the cost of investigation and remediation and removal of PCBs in the schools that exceed the school action levels. So ultimately, you want the manufacturers to pay, but before you get to that litigation award, if you get to that litigation award, then the state is going to pay for the cost of investigation, remediation, and removal.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we've got litigate, we have oil, we have this, we have PFAS. We got the money from PFAS. They like,
So, that's great.
that's also, yeah,
Or so.
okay, thanks. Yeah, Senator Weeks, no, Senator Lance.
If I could, so in that same sentence you just read, it did have the caveat that testing under 2021 acts resolves, et cetera. Does that limit the subset of schools?
It does. For first, it's only schools that were built before 2000, right? So and there aren't that many that weren't, but there were a couple that were built after 2000. You don't need to test for them because PCB material could have been used in those schools, that school construction. In addition, it limits that subset because that subset is about testing for the indoor air quality. And you'll see later on in this bill, if the school is out there doing construction that's unrelated to the testing indoor air quality and they find PCBs, you're not paying for that. That was their own action, their own initiative, and they triggered the requirements for cleanup on their own. It wasn't something triggered by the indoor air quality test. For example, if you are going to do site work, pretty much large site work construction anywhere for major construction, you do a core sample of the soil and to test what's in the soil, see if there's any hazardous material or other things in it. If you did that core sample and it came back with PCBs in it, the state isn't paying for you to clean up those PCBs because it wasn't part of your indoor air quality testing.
Yeah, Senator Williams.
So can schools opt to not test? Even if the A&R they have the funding.
So that's an interesting question. And the answer generally is no. Underneath existing language, which you will see on page 5 to 6 in section 2, currently it says all schools subject to the subsection shall test for PCBs on or before July 1, 2027. It says So that reads like the school is on the hook, right? But if you, on page 6, lines 2 to 3. So A&R was arguing at one point in the House that if you took away all this money, if you paused the program, the DEC testing and the agency of ed funding, that the schools would still be required to test. And they would still be required to test by 2027. So the House is proposing to strike that 2027 language. You still have the lead in there that says that DEC shall use up to 4.5 to complete air quality testing in public schools and improve recognized schools that were constructed or renovated before 1980. So there's still a testing requirement. Because the schools are not the ones on the hook to do the testing. The ones on the hook are EEC and A&R to do the testing, but there's still a testing requirement. So schools can't really opt out, but DEC can probably elongate that schedule for what they have left to test if necessary.
Interesting. Okay, so it's not what I think I initially thought was some kind of pause or some kind of stop. It's more putting shifting the financial responsibility and allowing DEC to sort of.
So there is a possibility of pause in this language. And you will see that going from page 2 to page 3. And in sub C, line 5, beginning July 1, 2024, and every month thereafter, A&R reports to Secretary of Administration and to you information about the funds that are available to do investigation, remediation, and removal of PCBs at schools. They first report to you the amount that's at the agency for those grants, whether the funds appropriated are sufficient to fully fund grants to complete investigation, remediation, and removal at schools, and when the secretary estimates that those funds will be exhausted.
Okay. Senator Hashim, Senator Williams. Thank you. That's helpful.
2 questions. Is anyone able to tell me how much is currently in the fund for remediation?
So there was 28.5 that was appropriated, 16 went to Burlington. And so I think the last time I heard there was a little more than 6 to 7.
And is
But I
that,
have to confirm, so let's put that with caveat. It's confirmation.
and is that spoken for? Is it assigned?
No, that's not assigned yet, so after you subtract 16 from 28, you get like 12, so there's like, then like 5.3, all 5 to 6 that's been committed already.
And do you happen to know how much is being appropriated for the upcoming fiscal year?
Right now, there's no appropriation that I'm aware of. There's money in the ECF, the Environmental Contingency Fund, that you'll see in a minute may be available. But right now, I don't know of any new appropriation to the Agency of Ed for the grant program.
So I think just a quick comment. I think this seems like a dynamic approach to the situation, and at first glance, my only concern is the potential for continuing to lead schools in this sort of unknown area as to whether they should, how much time they have to put into, I guess, mitigating the challenges that come with this, because, aside from, disrupting class schedules, there's also the challenges that come with, telling parents and talking to the community. And so I just worry about a back and forth where it's like, okay, we're gonna test, oh wait, they ran out of money, we're not gonna test, but.
Well, so ANRTEC has that schedule of testing, and they're reporting to you and the Secretary of Administration about whether or not there's enough funds to do the response, the investigation, remediation, and removal. You'll see that on page 3, line 16, if they report that there's $4 million or less remaining for investigation, remediation, and removal, they shall not initiate testing or payment for initial testing. So it's the initial testing, so they've not even been in the school yet to do a plan for testing. So they're not gonna they're not gonna initiate testing at any new school until there's a report back from the administration on how to fund this. But if there's a need, you'll see this on page 4, lines 3 through 9. When the General Assembly is not in session, you're 4 or below, but there's a need for more money to finish out that investigation or remediation rule, so schools aren't left on the hook. 2 million can be transferred by the E-board to
Is there any, the E-board is emergency board?
to make sure that those schools get the grants to do investigation, remediation. So the intent is not to leave a school in limbo once they've tested and know that they have to do investigation, remediation. But not to test further to put other schools into a requirement to do investigation, remediation, until you know what that long-term financing is going to be.
Excellent.
To center Hashim's question before we get started. So right now that 4 million, there's 6 million in that count.
That's,
All of a sudden, 2 million goes down 2 million, then
it stops,
it
right?
stops. Okay,
It pauses. And then there's opportunity, you're not in session,
the E-board could jump
the
in.
board throws in $2 million.
Okay,
There's potential for some additional testing at that point. But
Yeah.
Drop below 4 again. You're gonna be back in session by that point.
yeah,
And so the E-board won't be doing another $2 million transfer. You'll be back in session and hopefully you'll have a long-term concept for how to pay.
Senator Williams.
I'll donate the rest of my time to the gentleman from Wyndham, but I want to reserve the rest of his time the next time I have a question.
Oh, good, thank you.
Senator Gillis.
Thank you. So I just wanted to chime in on a couple of things. One, you, thank you, Ed Council, you brought up a point about schools. Originally, anyway, schools, would test when they had work they were gonna do, which is exactly what happened in Burlington, which started this whole cascading effect. We were gonna do renovations to our building, we tested, and the numbers came up higher than the extremely low numbers that were originally in, that were designated by DEC or ANR or all of the above. So that's what triggered the whole thing. So that's like a standard process. I also wanted to say that the $16 million that's supposedly going to Burlington has not gone to Burlington as of yet. So that's, I just wanted to clarify that.
So can I'd like to say something on the record on that, because I had been saying that Burlington hadn't requested it. And it turns out that they did request it. They requested it at the end of February. So that's the first request that's been put in
Okay.
for the $16 million, but they have requested it. They had not
Put in for it.
right.
So it's been requested, but it hasn't actually gone out.
Well, I mean, they've only put their request in a little over a month ago.
Oh,
And so, and apparently they're working. There might be some disagreement on what needs to be reimbursed.
I know, so.
do they want the
In other
16
words-
million?
No, we don't wanna know. I mean, why would we possibly want that? Yes, we do. And, okay, so TBD. We'll look forward to some
Right.
resolution, one way or another on that.
I think the agency and the school district are gonna have to work through what's gonna be reimbursed under, because remember, it's a reimbursement program. All of this, the agency grants, any money is reimbursement for investigation, remediation, and removal of PCBs. If it's not related to PCBs,
They don't.
it's not gonna get reimbursed. And so that's part of what I think is gonna go on in Burlington about the negotiation of what gets reimbursed up to $60 million. Which I think the school district would probably get there for PCD costs. But it's not gonna go to the full.
Sure,
That's
no,
interesting.
there's no, and I would.
Even though PCDs caused it, the whole thing, they can only use that money for
For the
PCD.
cost of, right,
Interesting.
Well, which brings me to my next point, which is that as from my experience, removing PCBs is not a simple task. So, when you mentioned they don't wanna leave districts in limbo, I mean, the whole thing is limbo, so I'm wondering, can you clarify that a little bit?
so it really depends on what you test for, where you test for it, and what population is exposed in that place. So if it's just adults at a low level in a room that has some ventilation, you probably can do mitigation instead of full remediation. If it's your preschool classroom, the level is going to be lower. The need for response might be higher. So DEC has the phase level. And that's DEC. Once you hit the federal levels, then you're into mandates. And things that you have to do in a certain amount of time. And people will tell you that schools have 4 years once you hit the federal mandates. That's kind of true. On average, it's like 4 years. But Twin Valley just got a 2-year letter. And so they were told that they have 2 years to develop a plan and 1 year from the development of the plan to remove.
Do the feds pay for that? When it's a
Yeah.
federal mandate, the feds don't pay for it? Okay. A few other things that I wanted to say, if I can, please. One is there anything in this bill that touches on the testing program? Because my understanding is as the mitigation, the removal, it's all complicated, but the testing is also complicated. You can go into a building one day and test and get 85, and you can go in 2 weeks later and get 30. And go, so is there anything in here that touches on the efficacy of the testing?
There's nothing really about the testing except removing that deadline date that we already reviewed, that schools have to. Where it says all schools have to test by 2027. Other than that, the action levels, the methodology, frequency, placement, none of that is addressed. But having helped do testing of these buildings, I know exactly what you're talking about. Because you can go into the Pink Lady at certain times of day and there will be 0. But you go in later in the day after the heat's been running, somebody's racked up the radiator, you're gonna get levels. You're gonna get levels of things in the system. And so I understand that, and this methodology is supposed to take care of that, but it's not 100%.
Thank you. My last comment, maybe, and I'm not telling any of you anything you don't already know, is that we have the second oldest school building stock in the country. We've had a thorough task force process that will hopefully be ongoing and continue. We're in what many folks are calling a financial crisis, so I just have to question again the wisdom of investing money in this very aged stock of buildings that hopefully we will be either taking down or improving or whatever it is we're gonna do. So thank you.
You're the chair of it, who can.
Well, I was just gonna say, he's probably a better person to talk to that issue than me.
I do have another question though, back to Senator Bulick's question about Burlington and funds. So generally, in terms of this process going forward, a district applies for the funds at a certain time, and those funds that they can get reimbursed for are strictly related
For
to.
the investigation, remediation, and removal of PCBs
Okay,
related to indoor air quality testing. If it wasn't discovered as part of the indoor air quality testing program, it is on the school to handle this. The state is not going to pay for that. Because the mandate, the program and the funding for it, it all stems from the testing of indoor air quality, right? If the school is gonna go out and do its own construction, say to put on an extension, build a new gym, et cetera, and they do their soil testing, then that triggers state and that can trigger state and federal requirements at that point. And that is not part of the indoor air quality testing program, it's not part of the grant program at AOE.
and just of curiosity, do we know how much Burlington has asked for up to this point? If they just put it in a month ago, based on what they've evaluated, do we know how much they're of that 16 million?
So because I erroneously said the last time I was in, I can't even remember what committee I was in, I think it was in Waste Means, I said that they hadn't asked for it yet.
Yeah.
I did my due diligence to find out when they asked for it and how much they asked for it.
Okay,
They've asked for all 16 million,
okay,
and it was February.
thank you. Please, Senator Hewitt.
I always say I'm never gonna speak again, I always do, but I just have to point out, and correct me if I'm wrong. But a scenario by which air quality is tested, it triggers a high level, which then triggers mediation and remediation. At which point soils are tested. If the remediation requires new construction or renovation, the soil is tested and then the soil is high. And that's not gonna be covered by this. I mean, I just wanna point out that that is. strange.
I don't know if the state has addressed that issue yet of the cascading effect,
If it gets.
but it's not beyond the veil. It's that could be something that the state is going to need to look at. Twin Valley might be an example of that, where the levels are high enough that the EPA has put in someone saying accelerated response plan. And if they're going through their response and they discover that there's more that they need to do, they might need the money,
Other questions from Mr. O'Grady? Representatives Conlon and Voss, it's completely up to you how you want to do it in terms of your timing, who's on the floor. I know you have a lot.
I'll follow up.
Great, okay. Pass that to Mr. O'Grady. Well,
Thank you. Peter Conlon, Chair of House Education. Following up on Rich Council testimony on 873, the PCB bill. This really sort of provides you all with an alternative to the bill that's currently on the wall, which could be stripped of its construction task force language, and which is the straight up pause that we sent you last year. This is more of a trigger, as probably has been explained to you. With the Agency of Natural Resources commitment to continuing the testing using additional funds from the from some of their solid waste funds, we became increasingly concerned that if the testing continues and there's not a pause put on, that the money that's set aside from the growing money, could be used up real fast. And so this is really meant to be a trigger to stop the pause, to stop the testing. When that money available for mitigation, remediation, and abatement hits $4 million. I offer it to you as something, as an alternative. However, I think that the number should be looked at very carefully. I'm not sure that
The dollar amount?
the dollar amount, I think 4 million is probably low. It's currently sitting at 7.1 million. But just to do the quarterly testing of the schools that are out there, you're talking probably in excess of $200,000.
Can
And
you say that again?
yeah, just to do the quarterly air testing, because those who have tested and have tested above the school action level have to be tested at least quarterly. There's even some interim testing involved in addition to the quarterly testing. For example, at North Country, that's $80,000. At Bellows Falls, I think that's high 60s for quarter. At Green Mountain Union High School, I think it's about 40. Twin Valley, I'm not sure about. At Twin Valley, I would really recommend you have folks come in. They have now rung the bell of the EPA, which everybody else will eventually. And they are now under a 2-year order, I think, to fully abate the PCBs as a result of the indoor air testing. So that's the basic concept here, is that just to basically say, all right, well, at least when it reaches this level, we gotta stop. If we're not gonna just all out stop. I am frankly very concerned that the dollars, even as they exist today, do not match our commitment in Act 78 last year that said that the state would not turn this into an unfunded mandate.
How did you reach the $4 million? Is that fair?
To a certain extent, we pulled it out of the air.
Okay. Questions for Representative Conlon? Here you go. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, please, yes.
So
I have
do this to you.
that wasn't great. No, you
Go
go.
ahead, no, please.
My question is a simple one, I think. In your research, estimation, testimony, wisdom, et cetera. You would prefer that we take up the bill that's sitting on the wall as opposed to this one, but this is a backup.
I would say having been now, I've now visited the schools, talked with people there. This Twin Valley situation is brand new. Then I think, yeah, sure, you got pause in the program and as quick as possible is probably a better way to go.
Senator Weeks.
So just for clarification, I believe you've said it, but just want to make sure I understand. So that the $4 million trigger, do you believe, is it the expectation that the 4 million residual would be enough to continue, would be enough for remediation of what's found at that point? Or it's just a trigger to stop additional testing?
It's a trigger to stop additional testing. I would say the answer to your question is, I'm not personally confident, but I think it's a huge question mark. So for example, U32 just got started into the investigation. They triggered school action levels. Who knows what that's gonna find? While investigations go on at these schools, and really nobody other than Twin Valley has hit even the point where they gotta have a plan. Testing continues. So you never know what you're gonna find in the next school. And I guess I remain concerned that anything could turn up at any time that could wipe this money out very quickly. And I just will point out that I would say that the General Assembly and the administration may have a different idea of what was meant in Act 78 of last year. I think that the Agency of Natural Resources is operating under what they think is the correct solution, which is to mitigate, i.e. perhaps run fans until such time as either the EPA, which is a 4-year deadline, says you gotta do something now, or you do a renovation project. In their testimony, they said, well, we feel we can work with our federal partners, and at 4 years is maybe flexible. I think the situation in Twin Valley may say exactly the opposite. And just that, I saw Act 78, the language you have in there as saying, we're committed to not having these costs fall on the school districts. I think if you're talking about mitigating for 7 years, 10 years until you do a renovation, if you even have one on the books, I'm not sure if that's a very good situation. If you want to take a field trip down to any of the schools that are running these fans, 100 fans, 24/7, see what it's like.
Were we supposed to get a report back from the testing, the first phase of testing I already went through?
I think, whatever you want to know is probably available on the Agency of Natural Resources website where that information rests, maybe the Department of Education or Agency of Education, I'm not sure which one.
Because in my district, I had quite a few principals came to me when it was first starting that just wanted to stop. That's why I asked the question. Because,
Peter, does this represent in part something the agency was pushing for also?
No.
No, okay,
I think that they have a strong desire to keep the testing going.
okay.
But this plan, in testimony, the administration signaled that they would oppose it.
That the administration would not oppose this.
That's right. They may have some differences of opinion on the $4 million.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Representative Bus.
Hello there.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Representative Tasha Bus from Woodstock, Plymouth, Reading, and House Education Committee. Thank you so much for having me today to talk about BOCES.
And we're told that the name may change.
The
What year?
name, yes, we
Okay.
did discuss the name a little bit. I know that the administration or the agency, excuse me, would like to potentially have it changed because in other states, BOCES is responsible or a governance structure for career and technical education.
Right.
And so it might come across confusing. I don't think the House Education Committee, we did not discuss it enough, nor do I think we're particularly tied to the name.
Yeah.
Or the nuts and bolts of what it is that we can do with it.
So it would be incredibly helpful for those of us that haven't followed this work. Tell us sort of the problem it's trying to solve.
Yes.
That'd be great.
The executive director of the Vermont Superintendents Association stated in our committee a couple of weeks ago, when speaking about superintendents and school board members, he said that they need to look to themselves for leadership as well. And so this bill gives school boards and superintendents the ability to lead from within. So you may be asking, well, what is a BOCES? A BOCES is a collaborative that allows supervisory unions to pay a fee for service in order to operate at scale and reduce the duplication of services. We are not new to this particular form of established, to create an established system. In fact, we're one of only 9 states in the United States that does not have an established system. So here's what a BOCES can do. We all want to do bulk purchasing, paper, technology, tables, chairs. That would be able to happen, not just in one BOCES, but there could be the ability to offer that service to any supervisory union in the state if that was your specialty. But like, we know our tables and chairs, and everyone just would contact them and get their tables and chairs right there. There could be a member price, there could be a non-member price. So that is one way. Federal grant writers, we all know how expensive those are. They require a very specific expertise and skill set. There's no reason why we need to have them in every supervisory union, nor is it even really possible. So if there's a BOCES, let's say it's the southeastern part of the state, they've got that person nailed down, great, everyone just contracts a fee for service with that particular grant writer.
Russ, may I just interrupt while you're on that? Sure. So one of the things we had hoped wraparound schools, community schools would do is that the schools that really needed it the most would get those dollars. Sometimes what happens is it's the schools that have the time and the energy, like you're describing, to write these grants and the people, power behind it to do it. Would this create any kind of conflict in any way, having that sort of the grant writers all in sort of one area, even though it might not benefit that particular area? And you may have just given it as an example to say that could happen, but it could always happen in other ways as well.
let me start by saying this is brand new, so
Yeah.
we may find issues that come up in the
Okay.
future, and we may have to visit this legislation because it's, whenever you start something new, there's gonna be a trial and error and it's definitely needed. However, to speak off the cuff, about it, I actually think it could be equally helpful. Because everything is then funneling through one grant writer that's writing that grant, to the federal government. And so it's gonna provide a lot of ease and proficiency. That federal grant writer will be able to kind of see the very nature of all the different applications and how they differ from rural districts to potentially greater populated districts. And to truly be able to bring, to us, to the agency, here's really how diverse the skill set is. And here's how we probably need to step up to assist to provide greater equity throughout our state. That is my dream.
Yeah, okay. Good. Senator Williams, you wanna?
So who's gonna be the referee? Make sure that the schools are here, get the grants right.
So it would be a fee for service, so there's no referee involved. If you wanna pay, you get to play. And if you think that you are particularly, I think that's also the reason why it's great, community school model that's only one type of grant, example. But, that is, I mean, I guess what you're saying is that what if that school doesn't have the ability to pay for that grant writer? Should, he or she, whoever the grant writer is, will be less expensive if they're creating all of the grants. That's for sure, because it'll be the same grant that they're writing to the feds. So there will be, that cost savings.
Senator Hushain?
Thank you. I'm curious about, what does this bill allow SUs to do that they're not currently able to do? And the reason I ask is, I'm looking at shared programs and services, and I'm thinking of, CTEs, for example, of, a student going to another school that's in a different area to access a program, things like that. And yeah, so what does this do that SUs can't currently do?
Great question. So right now, you may have a person that comes into a school and they are 0.25 FTE because they are providing art services or they're providing some special education services. And then they really need full-time employment. So that school has to figure out, well, how do I make up the other 0.75? So in this particular instance, if you've got a number of particularly rural schools even, that all need that 0.25 FTE doing that exact same thing, right now they each have to have an individual contract for employment. Which means they can technically collaborate because they're utilizing that person to do 4 different jobs to make up full-time work. But the employee doesn't get the benefit of full-time work. The BOCES could hire that particular person and say, all right, here, you're gonna go serve this contract in all 4 schools, but we're gonna be your employer. A BOCES can be a public employer, they are body politic and corporate, so they can organize, they can provide health insurance, and as well as be a part of the teacher pension plan. For those employees that are not a part of the providing education services, then it's the municipal type of supports.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Senator Williams?
So, where's the main engagement? Is it a state level organization or is it a regional? Is it an SU?
Yes, great question. So this is one of the things we struggled with the most, and this is what I would certainly encourage you to spend a bit more time on is where do you draw the lines? So we received in testimony, draw lines and put a cap on it. Because in states that did not choose to do that, they had a very strong number of BOCES, and that became untenable and expensive, right? Because what we tried to do in Act 46 is to reduce this. So we were brought a very non-official map from the superintendents about how they divided up the state into regions and they collaborated during COVID. And from that, we also talked about, well, Chittenden County, because it has an exceptional amount of the population, might need to have an extra BOCES to service regionally. And perhaps we need one more for the, oh boy, we haven't thought of that problem yet. So that's why we put 7 in the bill. Now, one thing I want to mention,
That in,
we put a
BOCES.
cap of 7
Yeah,
BOCES
okay.
statewide, and we were very flexible about the language, so the Secretary of Education would have to approve the creation of a BOCES. And if it's had to, does it satisfy the regionality of our state? Is basically do we have, if 3 are trying to get started just in Chittenden County, well, then we're not representing statewide. So, but we also didn't know if we wanted to draw really specific geographical boundaries. Because one of the things that really made me excited about this bill is I'd like to provide an example in my district. We started a program called the Options Program, and this is for special needs and extraordinary special needs. And they need to be kids that need to be out of the classroom. And right now, we have very few state placement options. Going out of the states, $200,000, in the states, $60,000 per kid, sometimes $30,000 to transport them. Sometimes it's residentially based and the whole family has to move. These are problems that we really need to solve that the BOCES can do. So we, with another district, rented space at our local recreation center, transportation, the teacher and the para-educator for 15 to 20 students annually runs us about $15,000 per child. And they're close enough to get reintegrated back into the classroom. So we have a lot of language in here into the purpose section about, least restrictive environment to make sure that they aren't shipped away to the options program and then stay there forever. The goal is to give them the skills to reintegrate. So that would be a great example of why you would want them regionally. But that same BOCES that's doing that regional could be the one that houses the grant writer that everyone in the state needs to access, which is the reason why you want a fee for service that might be membership based or non-membership based. So if you created that options program and you put money down to rent that space and hire those educators, you're going to want a member price because you've got skin in the game. But if you hired the grant, if you just want the grant writer service, you didn't put any skin in the game, well, your price might have to be a little bit higher because you did contribute up front to be a member. But you can, let's say that you're in the Northeast Kingdom and you're like, I'm good, I don't need a BOCES for anything, we're not close enough to any other schools to collaborate, but I only want that grant writer. Well, I don't need to be a member of any other BOCES except for the grant writer BOCES. So I'm just gonna become a member of that so I can get the lower price. We wanted it to be super flexible. I'm giving you like a lot of options. And these are just examples, but we just felt like it really helped people to be nimble like that. And to not have all of the options and guardrail. We wanted to put enough guardrails there to be safe and efficient and effective, but not to restrict anyone from getting the services that they really need.
you have another question?
Boy, Tom's.
Yes. Well, Ms. St. you said that this was,
Yeah.
we've carved out time so we can sort of figure this out because we don't
Right.
have a lot of time.
Right.
So two questions. So obviously this needs to happen legislatively, otherwise you wouldn't be here. People can't coordinate right now in these areas, like Senator Weeks said, unless, legislative action needs to take place.
Yes and no.
Okay,
So while it is possible,
yeah.
there are
this
many
makes sense.
benefits to it
Right.
being legislated. So this bill provides minimum requirements for the articles of agreement, which becomes the operating agreement. So it makes sure that all the BOCES are on a level playing field from an agreement standpoint, from a legal creation standpoint. It also makes sure that they have a website so
The
that
same level as each other or with whom?
with each other. So it would make sure that everyone has the ability to have their teachers be a part of the retirement plan. So all of those types of things are in this enabling language. I'm not for sure that that would have to happen if one SU just partners with another SU and they create a cooperative that isn't sort of regulated. I'm not for sure how their ability to provide those protections for their employees could exist. So that's part of it, but the ability for there to be websites and for this to be on the Agency of Education's website so that everybody knows the services are available and where to find them is also really important. Right now, you just have to do a bunch of Google searching to find out who does what, where.
So, who do the BOCES report to? The district or the AOE or?
That's a great question. So the board members, so if this SU wants and this SU want to collaborate, they can either do that through providing a member that is appointed by the supervisory union or a school board member. And then they make this collaboration. And then there are reports that are sent back that specifically have to address whether or not they are servicing the needs that they joined forces to solve in a cost-effective manner.
So it's not
So-
directed, it's like self-spawning.
Exactly. So it's not top-down.
So if I may, in any way, does it discourage merging? Could it discourage merging? I mean, one of the things with Act 46, again, we're in this moment, as you well know, we're looking at our schools, we're looking at school size, all that kind of thing. Act 46 looked at governance, but with that governance, I would say there was a hope that people would say, all right, we will now, with one school board, more control over looking at our elementary schools, and okay, we have 5, but only one of them has 10 kids in it. And we're going to, and it's not a great building, so now we're gonna have 4. In any way, does this sort of discourage that kind of thing? I'm not saying it's a bad thing, one way or the other, I'm just wondering your thoughts.
Well, these are the thoughts of Tisha Bus, not
Yeah,
that
yeah,
we heard from the committee
Yeah, yeah.
at all. To be honest with you, I think it could go in both directions.
Okay,
You're providing an ease for sometimes our smaller schools to get more services. And at the same time, you are getting connected to, you're connecting more with a system that might be providing services all over the state for you to see what you're missing.
okay.
And I think they both are equally important.
You said in the bill, I apologize, I haven't read it completely yet, but there was a limit of 7 BOCES.
Yes.
And those are kind of generated by topic or subject matter expertise or where'd the 7 come from?
So the 7 came from the 5 regions of the state that the superintendents used during COVID, plus 2 more to be nimble. And they're not directed at all. So they are very they will be self-created and evolving entities.
Okay, and then can you characterize AOE's reaction to this concept?
They certainly have been favorable to this concept, for sure. They did have a question about the name.
Sure.
Because of the career and technical education perspective, and the number still puzzles us all. So we decided to put 7 out there to create the 2 nimble ones and just move forward. Because no one's really for sure, but there's no one stopping someone, a superintendent, to come to the legislature next session or whenever this gets enacted to say, hey, here's what's happening in the field. Let's make an adjustment.
Senator Williams, and Bex.
So I'm just thinking about, how is this equitable? I mean, if BOCES can merge for the benefit of those schools and the other ones can't afford it, how is it gonna be fair and equitable across the state?
Well, I actually think that it reduces costs for the service that they would probably need to provide anyway. So let's say you're doing professional development in scientific or evidence-based literacy. And you need to do that for your kids. And your teachers are saying, we need coaching, we need coaching, we need coaching. And your school looks at providing that contract all by themselves. They may not be able to afford it. The BOCES might be the only way they can afford it. Because if they are we have one county that has 12 contracts for the exact same service.
Wow. Interesting, okay.
So, then you get an economy of scale. Even if it's a 10-15% reduction, take it.
Somebody's.
Yeah, a couple questions. So first, this invokes the whole concept, and we talked about it offline, of BRAC in the military, where we took bases and we did exactly the same thing, whether it was contracting or command structures or firefighting services, whatever, and we consolidated. So I get the concept, fully support it. But I'm always leery when a bill is more than 3 pages long, because then I know it came from somewhere.
Oh,
So I'm curious, is this really a AOE genesis? Is this something, or is this something that,
Not that I'm aware of at all. And in fact, they didn't even come in to testify until we were quite far along with this bill. So in the fact that we were actually surprised when they did show up, because we were like, where have you been? Where have you been on that? But I personally studied quite a bit the enabling language because I've created other nonprofits and I wanted to make sure that we had some consistencies, and I've run into some conflict of interest issues in the nonprofit world. So I definitely did a deep dive with a lot of research that our wonderful legislative counsel brought to the table. And she was excellent to work with. So no, this is not AOE generated.
and then just a question on kind of mechanics. It sounds like a school would need to predetermine the level of engagement in the BOCES the year before as they develop their budget. For example, if they recognize, or they thought they would need grants, they would say, okay, we need whatever, 0.25 FTE for grant writing for the year 2025.
The school, the district.
Or whatever the individual school or whoever, at what level, the individual school then fleets it up to the district, who fleets it up to the BOCES. I don't know the mechanism. I'm just saying that it sounds like, my point is that it sounds like we're predetermining engagement kind of the year before. So to your point, you were talking about coaches and what have you, but in this case, I'm just curious if that's kind of because BOCES can't just sit around, fat, dumb, and happy waiting for people to call them because they've got manpower on station. They got manpower, right? They have to know, okay, how many, what staff do they need to go up to support all of the various requests? Or are they going to kind of wing it the first year and find out what the level of engagement is before they adjust then for the second year to increase their staff, decrease their staff?
You absolutely have a full handle on the precariousness of getting this started,
Okay.
for sure. The answer is, I don't think that they're absolutely gonna know when they come out of the gate. They're gonna be taking some risks. They'll bring somebody on board. And one of the, as my business hat sits on my head, this gets me super excited and Twitter-pated about the fact that you're gonna have a business person in charge of making sure that as many people as possible has the thing that you offer as your BOCES. So if it is evidence-based, scientific coaching for our educators so that we can increase literacy scores, you are going to call every supervisory union in the district, and you're going to, in the state, And on top of that, you're gonna say, the more that joins, the lower we can make this cost. You don't have to worry about it. We have vetted this program. We're seeing success already in a certain supervisory union. They've already increased their literacy scores. You don't need to work so hard on that curriculum or spend all that money buying it and then you get it and you don't like it. Somebody's already working with it and is loving it and is seeing results from it. So that part I think is really exciting. And we don't operate that way these days. We operate in a lot of silos. And I think that's just speaking to the merger perspective. Like, will it? Like, maybe we've made it too easy for them not to, but we've also made it in a way that they're collaborating or they might actually want more.
Yeah. Senator, Bueller or Senator White.
She always gets her ring.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask a question. It's a hypothetical. Cause it's not gonna be a popular one, but I'm just gonna ask it. Why not just go directly to having fewer districts with fewer, maybe fewer overhead, fewer school boards? Like, why not just like do that?
This is also my personal opinion, not a representation of the House Education Committee fully, but I think that as we move forward, there's gonna need to be a lot of political will. And until that vision solidifies, this provides a great path towards certainly collaboration and cost savings.
I'm gonna be a little more blunt. So you said that these BOCES are nonprofits. And I really, right?
No, I created a lot of
Okay,
nonprofits.
okay. So these, who's funding the BOCES? AOE?
No, so the BOCES, you would, if this supervisory union and this supervisory union say, hey, let's create this BOCES, they're taking their money to provide the startup. So they're gonna put the skin in the game and they're gonna hire whoever's needed. That might be an executive director. They may just say, well, we're gonna come together. This superintendent's gonna say, we have a great treasurer. All right, so we've got the financial part covered and we're just gonna hire this one person. Or they could say, well, we wanna hire an executive director that oversees all of this. And they pay the salary. That's the reason why there would be a member and a non-member difference potentially in cost or fees. And maybe at some point, once they get enough going and there's enough that's coming out of that BOCES, they may choose to reduce that. And maybe no changes to member and non-member. We didn't restrict them to anything there. But yes, it is very, very self-directed. And one point that you made earlier that I wanted to speak to or question was, a lot of times your supervisory union already has line items in the budget for expenses that they have to, they already know that they're gonna spend some on professional development. They already know they're gonna spend money on curriculum. So that may not be incredibly directed just because the BOCES is created. It might just be oh, great, we don't have to vet this. We don't have to do this research on our own. We just saved, 20 hours of research time.
Great answer. And I get it, but I think so. Back to my question about equity. You're gonna have some that are gonna do it well and some that aren't. And so you're gonna always have a school district maybe that is paying more because they didn't put the right puzzle together. And sometimes I think that, I'm more of a top-down sort of person. When you leave it up to the individuals to put together their own organization, then that organization will probably prosper and the rest of them maybe not so much. So I just want to make sure that everything is equitably distributed. It makes sense to have people be in charge of their own destiny, for sure. That budget money drives it. So, but I'm just looking for some kind of a safeguard, give them some guardrails, keep them in there, to make sure they take advantage of what you're talking about.
I think that's an excellent point. I do think it helps a lot of schools that are less resourced get the resources that they need. But I can also see that if they need the resource of the extraordinary special education system, that might be challenging, but it sort of gives them a mentorship model to see how other supervisory unions have done it in a more transparent and easily accessible way than ever before. But that might be one of the things that they come back and say, like, we need to help them. Oh, and you did ask about formulate money, which is that we allocated $70,000, $10,000 per BOCES to get stood up. That would cover legal fees for drafting the articles of agreement, which becomes their organizational document, but then also to create a website that lists their services and whatnot and get it started.
Rep Bus, is that in the budget? Didn't the House pass?
Yes, we passed that, but that's in the budget.
It-
Did
Beth St. James Office of Legislative Counsel, the appropriation is in the bill itself. And
That's right.
it's from the ed fund.
That's right. I remember we had some of them.
Can I back up just to make sure I understand? So
Rep Bus, are you good on time? Because we're gonna try to keep you as long as we can, even after the walkthrough.
I'm either sitting here or on the House
All
floor,
right,
so
great.
who
Because I
knows?
would love to be able to get to the point at the end of the day that this is getting close to being baked.
Okay,
Or, I mean, we'll hear from folks, but I'd love to really make sure the committee is ready to roll. Okay, so you being here is huge.
okay, great.
Okay.
okay, so seven, but let's just say theoretically, 7 BOCES, okay, distributed across the state. Are each of those BOCES essentially potentially duplicating their effort to, like, they all deal with procurement consolidation, or they all deal with special education consolidation? Or is one BOCE like the subject matter expert on procurement for the state, and everybody emulates them or uses their services or what have you? Which perspective is it?
I think the answer in this very initial stage is both. If somebody is already coming out of the gate saying, we do procurement, then another BOCES, if they wanted to do procurement, would have to really wrestle with why. Or why them, because they're gonna be in literal business competition now. And so that kind of also brings in a new flavor into the educational realm. Because they're gonna try to get as many people to use their services to make it cost effective and so is the other. So unless there is extremely divergent principles behind why there needs to be something different, I would see that folks would very much have pause to do the same thing that somebody else is doing.
That's very good. Thank you.
How are we gonna share information? So, I mean, cause I've seen school districts that say, gee, this supervisory union is doing it this way. Why don't we go find out how they did it? If you've got, this biggest problem in Vermont, I see are terrain, lines of communication. If there was some way that they had a website in the sky that said, this is what we're doing. Cause you're kind of allowing everybody to do their own thing.
Yes,
Right.
so right now, you would have to Google and research each supervisory union, that's over 50, right? Now there'll be 7 maximum websites that you would go to for each BOCES to see what services they offer. So I think it would actually streamline the process of figuring out who's already doing what well.
If it works for you, we're gonna take a 5-minute break. We're gonna have Ledge Council take us through the bill.
Great.
We're gonna have probably a bunch more questions if you can stay.